right. What a good morning. What a good morning. Well, hey, listen, we are going to wrap up our Advent series that we've been talking about. Tomorrow night we have our Christmas Eve service, and I want to make sure I invite all of you guys to that. It is going to be a lot of fun. Tomorrow night, 6 o'clock, all age groups, from the youngest to the oldest in here. We're going to be able to sing some carols. We're going to be able to read the story of the birth of Christ, and then we're going to take communion as a church family. And then right after service, we're going to have hot dogs. Good night. We will not have hot dogs. That would be disgusting. But we will have hot chocolate, another hot thing, and some coffee out there afterwards. Oh, hot dogs. That literally turned my stomach, the thought of that. Come to carols and communion and eat hot dogs afterwards. That's just filthy. I'm sorry. But hey, so we've been walking through Advent. Advent is just talking about the birth of Christ and the anticipation and the waiting of the coming of Jesus. And we've been looking at different things. The first week, we kind of talked about generosity and faith and how those two things go together and the process that God calls you to walk through. That was when I was able to make coffee, and then apparently changed everyone's Christmas list as far as what coffee equipment they were needing for Christmas. So if you had to buy coffee equipment for a loved one this year, I'm sorry. I hope you bought good stuff. And then the next week, we talked about hope, and we talked about that we can't miss hope, that God, when he sent Jesus, he sent hope. And Jesus is the hope of the world, and we have to be able to see him. Sometimes we can miss him when he's in the middle of our situation. And so we talked about hope. And then last week, my wife shared about joy, and I'm a little biased, but I thought it was incredible. And we talked about the joy that comes from a relationship with Christ, and the joy that you can receive that not only internally changes you, but produces a result of joy on the exterior of your life when you come to God through Jesus. And so they were all amazing, amazing weeks. And this week we're going to continue. We're going to take the last week, and we are going to talk about love. And love is important because if you had to break it down, the whole Bible into one word, I think love would have to be the one word. Because the entire Bible from the beginning to the end is God's love letter to you. It's written over hundreds, thousands of years by multiple authors, all with one single common thread of identity, which is a father's heart and desire to get the children that he loves back. And there's a lot of different ways and a lot of different perspectives of how it came. But all of that culminates to the one point, the birth of Jesus, that Jesus was born. And one of the things we say about this series, or about this season is that love came down. That God literally came down in the form of man and was born in Bethlehem through the body of Jesus. And coming down is important. I think there's so many things because the Bible, there's no mistakes. Everything points to the character of who God is. And I think it's important to know that Jesus came down because, you can help from afar. You can even cheer from afar, but that's a lot different than coming down. Anybody ever move? When you move, you appreciate people saying like, hey, praying for your move, man. You go and get it. I'm praying that you're going to have good weather. Go and get out there. That's great. You appreciate that. But that doesn't help your soul to get up those stairs. You know what I'm saying? When someone says, hey, I'm coming, and I'm coming down to your house, and I'm going to help you move. Oh, and I'm bringing my pickup truck. That means something. You know what I'm saying? You came down. You're in it. You're in it with them. Jesus didn't just fix you from up high. Jesus came down. He got in it with you. You see what I'm saying? He shoulder to shoulder. He walked this earth because he wanted you to know that he's with you, that he's side by side. If you have to move, he would be there to help you move. That's what kind of friend we have in Jesus. That's the kind of thing that him coming down. And so it speaks to the character of him. But the birth of Christ is amazing, but really the birth of Christ represents the fact that we get the ability to see the life of Christ. That we get to see how Jesus lived and the life that he lived. Because in John chapter 14, it actually, Jesus says that if you've seen me, then you've seen the Father. If you want to know how the Father acts, how he behaves, then all you have to do is look at me. Look at my life. Look how I walk. Look what moves me to compassion. Look what touches my heart. Look what angers me. And then you'll know the Father's character. Because before Jesus, we had pictures of God, but they weren't clear. But once we got to see Jesus, we get to on earth see the character and the person of the Father through the life of Jesus. And so we get to see that. And, we don't get a lot of Jesus' early life. We basically get the birth, we get a little short check-in at 12 years old, and then all of a sudden he's 30. Right? But I want to look at it because love came down, and everything that God said, when the people would ask Jesus, what's the most important commandment? Both of them had to do with love. Love God and love others. That's it. That's who Jesus was. And so I want to look at 5 characteristics of love that we can see in the life of Christ and how they apply to us in this season of celebrating him. So first, the first thing, love faces opposition early. The weakest things are often in the beginning stages. I have 4 sons. 3 of them are on stage. They're good-looking boys. And my 7-month-old is the easiest one for me to beat up when we wrestle. As long as his nails are trimmed. Because he got a hold of my face of the day and I tapped out. It was over. But as the boys get older, it becomes a little harder for me to attack them and dominate them the way I'd like to. My 11 and 7-year-old have somehow figured out that they think that between the 2 of them, they could maybe take me. And although they can't know this, I'm afraid they're not too far away with their teamwork. You see, when things are young and early on, it's at its weakest state. And Christ shows us that at his very birth, he was born, the shepherds came, the wise men came, but then when the wise men came, Herod heard that there was this new Messiah and he wanted him killed. And so he ordered that all of the boys 2 years and under in the area of Bethlehem would be killed. And it was a tragedy, it was devastating. But an angel spoke to Joseph before this happened, and he took Jesus to Egypt. So Jesus was saved. But even Jesus was in his most fragile state, young. Love is often fragile when it's young. Relationships are most fragile when they're early on. Sometimes we think, but I'm in love and I can't wait. But when you haven't been through stuff, you don't have roots. And it's easy to get pulled out. We have to understand that we can't give up on love just because it gets hard. Or just because we face opposition. Or just because someone comes and attacks. First service, we got to celebrate a couple who were celebrating yesterday their 41st wedding anniversary. And that's amazing. Wayne and Paula Rice. 41 years. And you know what? They love each other more today than they did 41 years ago. And their love is stronger today because love grows in time. So for those of you who are maybe early in relationships, you can't quit when it gets hard. You can't quit over the first opposition. If we quit for the first opposition, then most of us would have quit probably on the wedding day shortly after I do. Maybe you lasted longer. My wife and I fought shortly after. I know it shocks you. We rarely fight. But when we do, no, I'm just kidding. But love will face opposition early. If you know that, you're ready for it. But if you don't see it, then it'll blindside you and you'll be shocked that all of a sudden a relationship that you have is facing opposition. The second thing, love takes time to perfect. Love takes time to perfect. You know, I believe there's people here today that you have a calling on your life. You know that God's called you to something. You know that God is telling you that you have something in your life that you're called to do. Maybe it's in ministry, maybe it's in relationships, maybe it's at work, maybe it's some kind of an achievement. You know that you have something. But we have an issue in our culture today. We love for things to be instant. Everything we have is instant. We have instant access to news and relationships. You don't even have to wait for pictures to be developed. You instantly get to see it. I watched a video online yesterday. Why, I don't know. Why do we ever watch videos online? But it was a guy, he was ranting about the fact that he was so upset that it took 5.5 to 6 minutes for his microwavable chicken pot pie to be done. And that was just too long. And then came the real fury when he realized that after it was microwaved, you were supposed to let it rest for 5 minutes. A 10-minute meal is absurd. This is what we live with. We have this society. But you understand that God is not a fast food microwave dinner God. God can call you to something before you're ever equipped to do that thing. David was called to be the king of Israel, and then he immediately after he got anointed with oil went back and watched the sheep. But we sometimes think that when God calls us, all of a sudden we're ready, and we think that we should instantly be able to step out into what that calling is. But that's not how God works. God's in the process. Because God knows that the process is what develops roots. So that the first time you face opposition in your life, you don't get pulled out. You see, Jesus was born a baby. And at 12 years old, he was in the temple making people just mind-blowing demonstrations of his knowledge of God's word. And if anyone was ready at 12 years old to launch into full-time ministry, it was Jesus. And he wasn't ready. If it took Jesus 30 years to get prepared, how long is it going to take you for your calling? Sometimes when I'm speaking to the young people, we think, oh, I know it better. I could do it better. I could do better than my boss. I could do better than that guy. I could sing better than that person. And listen, you probably could. But you're not ready. You're not ready. You think you're ready, but you're only ready in the perfect situations. Jesus needed to be ready not just when he was in the temple, but when he was in the storm. Anybody can preach good when you're in a good scenario. It's not good when everything around you is in chaos. Love takes time to perfect. God's working on you. But when Jesus was ready, it went off. As soon as it was time, Jesus didn't stop. When God has you prepared, you may not know how long it is, you may not know what's going on, but the love and the calling that he's placed in your heart, just understand you may be in a season of preparation. But when it's time to go, get ready, because God's calling you to something, and you'll see it. The third one's important, and we're going to come back around to this one. Love invites others to participate in the journey. It's not love if you do it by yourself. I'm going to say it again. It's not love if you do it by yourself. If you walk through life and you walk through a process and it's alone, you're not walking in love. Because love always has company. You see, Jesus did not need the disciples. They did not help him in his process. They did not make his life easier. In fact, most times it was the exact opposite. They were cutting people's ears off when he was just trying to talk to people. They were stealing some small kid's lunch whenever he told them to do something. Like, they just kept getting in the way. Jesus could have done it alone, but Jesus knows that love is not alone. It's not good for man to be alone. We're called to invite other people to participate in the process, in the journey, because they need it. Because it's good for them, not because it's good for us. You see, Jesus invited those disciples to participate in his journey, not because it helped him, but because it helped them. And guess what? He even knew one of them was going to reject him. And he still invited him. Sometimes we, and I'm speaking to myself, can be nervous about inviting people into the process. Because it's scary, because it can seem weird, or because it's inconvenient. But God gave us an example of love that invited people into the process, into the journey. That's why in Mark chapter 1, verse 16, it said one day Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee. He saw Simon and his brother Andrew throwing a net into the water, for they fished for a living. Jesus called out to them, "Come follow me, and I'll show you how to fish for people." And they left their nets at once and followed him. A little further up the shore, Jesus saw Zebedee's son, James and John, in a boat repairing their nets, and he called them at once, and they also followed him, leaving their father, Zebedee, in the boat with the hired men. Jesus invited some guys on the journey, not because of where they were at, but because of where he knew they would get to. You see, Jesus already invited you into this journey. That's why you're here. We're all at different points in our journey. We're all at different places in our journey. But as a result of that, we get an opportunity to find and to seek out people and invite them to participate in this journey. Not for us, for them. Not because you get something, not because I get something, but because they get a relationship with a God who loves them. And that's what love does. The fourth thing is love is moved to compassion. This one's a big one. In the same chapter, Mark chapter 1, verse 41, a leper came to Jesus and said, "Are you willing to heal me?" And Jesus answered, it says, moved with compassion, Jesus reached out and touched him. "I am willing," he said, "be healed." And then it said, but the man went and spread the word, proclaiming to everyone what had happened. As a result, large crowds soon surrounded Jesus, and he couldn't publicly enter a town anywhere. He had to stay out in the secluded places, but people from everywhere kept coming to him. Jesus was moved to compassion a lot. If you read the Gospels, that's something you see a lot, Jesus being moved to compassion. And the thing you have to understand is Jesus didn't come to this earth to heal people. He came to elevate the law to its proper place, to live a blameless life, and then to die a sacrificial death while spreading the truth of his Father's message. When Jesus healed people, it's because he was moved to compassion for them. And he did it for them even when it was inconvenient for him. Even when it slowed down his opportunity to accomplish his goals and his tasks, even when it wasn't on his schedule or when he was most rested or when he felt at a high place. Many times Jesus would try to escape from a group of people and they would beat him to where he was going. And the Bible would say he was moved with compassion and took care of them. You see, Jesus shows us this picture of a compassion that was greater than himself, that he viewed the needs of the people greater than the roles and the goals and the needs of himself. And this is hard for me. And let me tell you why it's hard for me. There's two things I really just can't stand in life. I hate being late. Don't like it. Stop laughing. But there's one thing I hate more than being late. way more than being late. I hate having to go back for something. I hate it. And I mean, this is dysfunctionally extreme. If I leave my keys on my desk and I step outside of my door and realize I left my keys, I will reprimand myself for minutes about the fact that I had to turn around and go back and get my keys. And this is through my wife has burst into tears as we're driving to church because she realized she forgot something. And she knows I will be upset because we have to turn back around. But God showed us in Jesus was always willing to turn around. Jesus was always willing to go to the long way if it meant finding somebody. Jesus was always willing to cross to the other side when there was someone there who needed him. Jesus was always willing to stop and wait and be late if it meant taking care of someone, even if it meant someone else died, but he knew he could raise them from the dead. You see, Jesus didn't mind going back. When God moves you to compassion, it probably won't fit your schedule. It probably won't be on your to-do list. It probably won't make it where you accomplish all your check marks for the day. And you may even have to go backwards. There's been times that God's spoken to me and I said, oh God, man, I was just there. I was just there. If you would have told me when I was there, I would have done it if time permitted. But I'm not there anymore, and you can't expect me to go back there. I'm here. You see how it works? But the compassion that God constantly shows is a compassion that's willing to go to extreme measures, even for one person. And so one of the things that God's been challenging me is that, you know what, when it comes down to love being moved to compassion, I may have an opportunity where my day's plans get ruined. That all my check marks are out the door. And then I may have to go to a different part. I may have to go down 71st during Christmas. Yeah. And after today, you may have to too. Because when Jesus is moved to compassion, he just did it. And let me tell you why. Because his life showed us this, that love never gives up. Love never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. That's the love that Christ lived on this earth. A never give up love. His love never gives up on you. No matter what decisions you're making, no matter what thing that has gripped you today, no matter what sin you're struggling with in private, no matter what you try to pretend that doesn't exist but has captivated you, and you know it and you think that you're disgusting to Jesus, it's not the case. Jesus' love never gives up on you. He never gives up. I think that's my favorite thing about Jesus, is that he never gives up. He never quit. He never took an off day. He was constantly loving. He never loses faith in you, even when you lose faith in yourself. He never says, you're not going to make it. You're not going to get there. I don't believe in you. I'm the Alpha and Omega. I know the beginning from the end. I'm just going to give up now. He never loses faith in you. He never stops believing that you can achieve something greater than what you're achieving right now. Never. no matter where you're at, no matter what age you are, no matter what you've done to be disqualified. He never loses faith in you because he loves you, and that's how God's love works. God's love is unlogical if you haven't noticed it. It makes no sense. You'll never be able to put it on a paper. You will never deserve the love that God has for you. That's why it's a gift. I sometimes wonder, how many circumstances did I make Christ endure in my life? How many circumstances did Christ love me through because of my bad decisions, because of my mistakes, because of what I've done in my life? How many times did Christ never leave my side, even when I was making poor choices? Because he endures every circumstance. Because if he was willing to endure the cross for you to be able to come to him, then he's willing to endure your battle with pornography, or your battle with addiction, or the fact that you can't allow forgiveness into your heart, or the anger that you hold on to. He's willing to endure it with you. He doesn't matter how ugly it gets. He's right there enduring it next to you, saying, we can do this because I don't lose faith in you. I never give up on you. My love doesn't give up on you. It endures. Now, these are hard. And we're called to love like this, but we're not Jesus. So we need a lot of help. I'm flawed. I won't even go back to my desk. But you know, the thing that God just kept telling me over and over again is, I invited you to participate in this journey. Who are you inviting to participate in the journey? Who are you seeking out and saying, hey, come with me. Come have lunch with me. Come over to my house for dinner. Come to church. Where's my Peter? The one who's annoying, who's going to say the wrong thing at the wrong time, who's going to embarrass you in front of your friends. And yet you're supposed to say, hey, will you participate in the journey with me? And let me tell you why. It's not for you. It's for them. Listen, we're a church that loves people, and we need to get more comfortable inviting people to participate in the journey. But not because we get something. Not because we think, we do not take an approach to ministry and reaching out to people as some kind of weird multi-level marketing down chain, that if we can just get enough people under us and they can get people under them, then you know what, we can have a better church, we can have a balcony or something. That's not how this works. That's not what we're doing. Jesus called those disciples to follow him because he knew they needed a relationship with Christ. They were lost. They were broken. We invite people to participate in the journey because that's what they need. Because they need it. I'm not inviting people to church so I get gold stars. I'm not going to try to encapsulate something and take somebody out to lunch and say that it's some kind of ministry expense. Listen, Jesus didn't say he was doing ministry. Jesus said he was about the Father's business. Jesus didn't go on a missions trip to Galilee. Jesus went over there because there was people who needed to hear about a God who loved them. People aren't prizes. People are God's kids, and the ones who need Jesus are the ones we have to go and invite into the process. And you saw what it took. All it took was an invitation. Do you know how many people don't go to church because they just haven't been invited? Do you know how many people grew up in church and even consider themselves saved, but they don't have a church home because they were rejected somewhere, they were hurt, and they need someone who's just willing to invite them to come somewhere? And last I checked, this is a safe place. Nobody in this room is perfect. And there's people out there, man, that are broken, that are lost. People who don't know Jesus. But even worse, people who know Jesus, but they actually don't know him. They're walking around in shame. And that Jesus is enduring that circumstance over and over again, reaching out saying, I'm not mad at you. We live in a city where almost everybody's gone to church once. But we also live in a city where a large portion of people have been offended and hurt and wounded by church or people who go to church. And fair or unfair, it doesn't matter. The thing you get to do is you get to say, hey, I want to invite you into this process. And I know you got hurt by church, but that's not my Jesus. That person may have heard you, that place may have heard you, that place may have even used the name of Jesus, but I'm telling you what, if it left you wounded, if it left you broken, if it left you hurt, that wasn't my Jesus. Because that's not how he leaves people. He was moved with compassion, and he reached out, and he loved people, and he healed people, and he helped people. And that's what he wants to do for you, because he's about freeing people, not about putting them in bondage. We have truth. We get to invite people to participate in that truth. Not awkwardly. Don't go to the mall and invite random people you've never met. Don't walk around saying, if you died today, would you go to heaven or hell? Don't do that. Maybe you used to do that. My wife used to witness to every single taxi cab driver in Bogota, Colombia that she met. There's a lot of them who got saved just so she'd stop talking. I'm telling you to do something out of a relationship. I'm telling you that you should be listening to love, and when love moves your heart to compassion, you get to invite them into the journey because you are that person for them. You're not going to be that person for everyone. Jesus only invited 12. One of them failed. You're not called to do it for everyone, but you are called to do it for some people. We're called to love, church. We're called to walk in those things. We're called to have the knowledge that love faces opposition early and that it takes time to perfect. That we get to invite other people to participate in the journey, and on that process, our hearts can be moved to compassion. And no matter what opposition we're facing in that moment, we can walk out and do it. Not because of us, but because of him. That we get to exercise a love that never gives up, that never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. And we do this not because we think we will become more loved if we do it. I have a news flash for you. You can't be more loved than you are right now. There is nothing you can do that would make God love you more. Nothing. There's also nothing you can do that will make God love you less. He loves you. He loves you. He loves you with an eternal love. And he's willing to spend the rest of your life proving it to you. We don't love people because we want to get more love from God. No. We love people because we've already been loved. And if you really have been loved, if you've really had something change you, you share it. We share other stuff. We share restaurants we love, products we like, shampoo that smells awesome. We share a lot of stuff. But if something really touches you, you share it. And so we love people because God's already loved us and he's changing us. You don't have to be perfect to invite other people into the journey. In fact, if you just be honest and say, I'm not perfect, but do you want to walk down this path with me? And we'll see what happens. With every head bowed real quick. If you've never made a decision to accept Jesus, I'm going to give you a chance today. Because love came down because he wanted to be shoulder to shoulder with you. He wanted to love you through every circumstance. He wanted to tell you, I know what you're going through, and let's walk it out. And so if you've never accepted Jesus today, we're just going to say a prayer together. And I just want everyone to repeat after me and say, Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for sending Jesus to die for me. Thank you for your love. And that through your Son, I can be restored to you. It's in Jesus' name we pray.